Welcome, dear listeners, to a journey into the ancient world of myths and timeless legends. Tonight we walk among gods, heroes, and whispers of destiny that echo through the ages. This is a story of Athena, goddess of wisdom, and Perseus, a mortal who dared to seek greatness. It is not only a tale of adventure, but also of guidance, courage, and the quiet power of wisdom. In the land of Greece, where mountains touched the sky and seas sang to the horizon, myths were born. They were not just stories, but lessons wrapped in wonder, teaching mortals how to live with honor. Among these tales stands Perseus, a young man of courage with fate calling him to something greater. But no hero stands alone, and even the bravest heart needs the light of wisdom to find its way. Athena, ever watchful, chose to guide this mortal, seeing in him the spark of true heroism. So join me now as we open the scroll of legend and follow the path of Athena and Perseus together. In the beginning, let us step gently into the land where myths were not just tales, but living breath. Greece, a place where the mountains reached high, where the seas sang eternal songs to the horizon. Here, the sky shimmered with divine presence, and every grove or stone could hold a whisper of gods. People told stories to explain the world, stories that wrapped wisdom inside wonder and mystery. These myths lived not only in scrolls but in hearts, shaping lives, guiding choices, and inspiring courage. Among these countless tales, one shines with the glow of destiny, the story of Perseus, a mortal youth. Perseus was no mighty warrior when his name first entered the songs told by storytellers of old. He was a boy shaped by fate, with a path hidden in the shadows, waiting for him to discover. His world was one of kings and kingdoms, but also of promises, prophecies, and challenges yet unseen. Whispers followed him, soft as the breeze, telling of a future filled with trials and a hero's mark. Yet even the bravest path begins in uncertainty. For heroes are not born, they are made through choices. The people of Greece believed that destiny was not only in strength, but in the courage of the spirit. A hero, they said, was not measured by the sword in his hand, but by the light in his heart. It was in this world that Perseus grew, learning to listen, learning to dream, and longing for purpose. He watched ships leave the shore, carrying men to unknown lands, and wondered what awaited him. He saw temples filled with prayers and offerings, and he felt the gaze of the gods upon him. In every shadow of the olive trees, in every glimmer of starlight, there was the sense of destiny. And though Perseus did not yet know his task, he could feel that his life was part of something vast. For Greece was a stage where mortals and gods met, where wisdom guided courage and dreams grew wings. And soon the name Perseus would no longer belong only to a boy, but to a hero remembered forever. For in this world of myths, even the smallest step could open the path to a story eternal. And in the silence before his quest, Perseus stood at the edge of life, ready to answer destiny's call. Perseus grew beneath the gaze of the stars, where every night carried whispers of stories older than kings. He was the son of Danae, a woman whose fate had been woven by prophecy, as unshakable as the tides. His birth was no ordinary tale, for it began with fear, a king's dread of destiny and the will of gods. A prophecy had spoken that Danae's child would one day bring the fall of King Acrisius of Argos. Acrisius, consumed by fear, tried to deny fate, yet destiny is a river no man can dam or bind. He locked Danae in a bronze chamber, hidden from the world, thinking no child could ever be born there. But the gods see beyond walls, and Zeus himself came in a form of golden light to visit her. From that divine union came Perseus, a child born in secret yet destined for greatness beyond imagination. When Acrisius discovered the boy, terror gripped him, but he feared the anger of Zeus more than blood. So he set mother and child into a wooden chest, cast adrift upon the endless sea to perish. Yet fate was kind, and the waves carried them safely to the island of Seriphos, where fishermen found them. Dictys, a man of humble heart, pulled the chest from the shore and gave them shelter without question. On Seriphos, Perseus grew strong, learning the ways of the land, the sea, and the kindness of men. But shadows lingered, for the island was ruled by King Polydectes, whose heart was sly and hunger never ceased. Polydectes desired Danae, but a refusal only fed his pride and envy until his eyes turned toward Perseus. The boy's presence was a barrier, a wall of loyalty that stood between the king and Danae's heart. So Polydectes plotted, weaving a snare of words and schemes, for cunning often strikes where swords cannot. He announced a grand banquet, where every man must bring a gift fit to honor his noble reign. The lords brought treasures of wealth and beauty, but Perseus, with nothing, could only offer words of defiance. He declared he would bring the head of Medusa, the Gorgon, whose gaze turned the living into stone. The court laughed, for no man had ever returned from such a quest. Yet Polydectes' smile grew cold, for he had trapped the boy with his own vow, binding him to a task meant to seal his doom. Still, in that moment of challenge, destiny stirred, for the gods had been watching, and Perseus would not stand alone. Athena, goddess of wisdom, and Hermes, swift guide of travelers, turned their gaze upon the mortal youth. For even in peril, the spark of a hero shines brightest. And so began Perseus's path toward legend. His journey was no longer just survival, but the shaping of courage through the guidance of divine will. And with the promise of gods at his side, the boy of prophecy took his first step into myth. Perseus left Seriphos with determination burning brighter than the morning sun rising over the endless sea. The task before him was clear, yet impossible to mortal eyes. For no man had ever faced the Gorgon and returned. He walked with questions heavy on his heart, but the gods had not abandoned him. For Athena soon appeared. The goddess came in quiet radiance, her eyes sharp with wisdom, her voice carrying both calm and command. She told Perseus that courage alone would fail, but knowledge and gifts from the divine could guide his hand. Athena led him to Hermes, swift-footed messenger of Olympus, whose smile carried both mischief and divine certainty. Hermes gifted Perseus a curved blade, sharp as truth, forged by the gods to cut through stone and shadow. Athena herself offered a polished bronze shield, not for defense alone, but as a mirror against Medusa's deadly gaze. Together, they guided him toward the Gray Sisters, three beings as ancient as night, keepers of secret knowledge. The sisters shared one eye and one tooth, passing them between trembling hands as they whispered riddles of fate. Perseus, with Athena's wisdom, seized their single eye and demanded truth before he would return it to them. Reluctant, the sisters spoke, revealing the hidden path to the nymphs who guarded treasures meant for heroes alone. Thus, Perseus traveled farther, across wild lands where silence lingered, and the earth itself seemed to test his will. The nymphs welcomed him, touched by divine favor, and they offered gifts no mortal had ever dreamed to wield. From them he received winged sandals, light as breath, carrying him across sky and sea with unbroken speed. They gave him a magical pouch, crafted to hold the head of the Gorgon without danger or decay. And they offered a helmet of invisibility, born from Hades' realm, to cloak Perseus from the eyes of death. Armed with these divine tools, the boy of prophecy stood taller, though the weight of destiny pressed on him. Athena reminded him that strength without wisdom was ruin, and courage without caution would lead to silence. She urged him to trust the shield, to turn his eyes away, and let reflection guide his strike. Perseus listened, for in her voice was not only command, but the care of one who saw his path. With winged sandals at his feet, the curved blade in hand, and the shield shining, he felt unshakable. Hermes laughed with joy, declaring the hero ready, though even he knew the shadows of the Gorgon were near. The wind carried Perseus across oceans, past lands unknown, toward the edge of the world where monsters dwell. Night fell heavy, and the stars lit his way, as if the heavens themselves followed each step of his flight. In the distance, he could sense the silence of stone, a graveyard of men who had faced Medusa before. But Perseus was no longer just a boy from Seriphos. He was the chosen, armed by gods, guided by fate. And so his journey pressed forward, each heartbeat drawing him closer to the shadowed lair of the Gorgon. The air grew colder as Perseus neared the edge of the world, where the lair of the Gorgon lay in shadow. The land was barren, marked with statues of warriors, frozen mid-stride, silent witnesses to Medusa's cursed power. Each stone figure carried terror in its features, a reminder that one glance could end life in an instant. Perseus felt the weight of destiny pressing harder, but Athena's words echoed in his heart, steadying his resolve. He tightened his grip on the curved blade, the shield shining faintly, reflecting the pale light of the moon. The winged sandals carried him softly, and the helmet of invisibility cloaked him like the breath of night. Hermes' laughter lingered in memory, but silence ruled here, broken only by the whisper of shifting sand. At last, he saw the dark cavern, a place untouched by the sun, where shadows gathered thick and deep. Inside, the sisters of Medusa slept, coiled in the stillness of dread, their serpents hissing with restless dreams. Two were immortal, eternal and untouchable, but one alone bore the curse of mortality, and her name was Medusa. Perseus knew the gods had guided him not to slay for glory, but to prove wisdom could master fear. He raised the shield, holding it before him, its polished surface his only window into the cavern of death. Step by step, he moved with patience, never once lifting his eyes to meet the living horror ahead. The bronze reflected a flicker of serpents, writhing like rivers of venom, circling the head of the sleeping Gorgon. Her breath was heavy, and her form twisted, once beautiful, now broken by the cruelty of divine punishment. Perseus felt pity stir within him, for this creature had not chosen her curse, yet bore its endless burden. Still, the task could not be abandoned, for to falter was to surrender his mother's safety and his fate. He whispered a prayer to Athena, asking for guidance, for strength to act, with both courage and mercy. The shield showed him Medusa's face, a nightmare of serpents and sorrow, eyes closed in restless slumber. Perseus steadied his heart, lifted the blade, and with one sure stroke guided by gods, the silence deepened. He placed the head swiftly into the magical pouch, sealing its gaze, the curse contained within shadows of leather. The cavern shuddered with the cries of her immortal sisters, their voices echoing like storms breaking through mountains. They raged and struck blindly, but Perseus vanished beneath the helm of darkness, unseen as wind through the night. The winged sandals carried him upward, far from their reach, his breath heavy, but his spirit unbroken. Stars wheeled above him, and the sea stretched endless. But the weight of what he carried was immense. Athena's voice whispered again, not of triumph, but of balance. for even victory bears sorrow in its shadow. Perseus did not look back at the cavern, nor at the land of stone, for he knew his path. The journey ahead still held trials, yet he now bore the proof of destiny and the trust of the gods. So he flew onward, carrying both burden and hope, a hero shaped not only by courage, but by wisdom. Perseus soared across the endless sky, the sea below glittering, the stars above guiding him with silent light. The weight of the pouch at his side was heavy, yet it was not only Medusa's head that he carried. He carried the will of the gods, the hope of his mother, and the silent lessons of Athena's wisdom. Every beat of the winged sandals brought him closer to destiny, yet danger still lingered across land and sea. Far below, the coast of Ethiopia stretched, a land trembling under the wrath of the sea god Poseidon. The waves raged higher each day, punishing King Cepheus and Queen Cassiopeia for words spoken in reckless pride. Cassiopeia had boasted her beauty surpassed that of the sea nymphs, and her vanity drew divine anger. Poseidon's fury had unleashed a monster from the deep, a beast of chaos devouring all in its path. In desperation, the king and queen turned to prophecy, seeking counsel from the oracles of their land. The prophecy spoke of sacrifice, of their daughter Andromeda chained to a rock to calm the gods' rage. So she was bound at the edge of the sea, her figure trembling beneath the weight of cruel fate. When Perseus descended, the cries of the people reached him, their sorrow carried on the wind like lament. He saw Andromeda, her chains glinting under the moon, her eyes wide with fear, yet shining with dignity. The sea roared louder, and from its depths rose the monster, scales glistening, jaws opening wide in hunger. Perseus felt the weight of choice pressed down, to turn away, or to stand against the impossible. But he remembered Athena's voice, the shield in his hand, the wisdom that courage was action in fear. He soared higher, the sandals carrying him above the waves, while the people below cried out in despair. The beast surged forward, striking against the shore, its roar like thunder shaking the stones of the coast. Andromeda closed her eyes, awaiting doom, yet Perseus refused to let her story end in sorrow. With swift resolve, he reached into the pouch, pulling forth the head whose power no mortal could resist. The shield reflected its dreadful image. The monster's eyes met the curse, and its fury froze in stone. The waves crashed around the lifeless form, the sea falling silent, the punishment broken by Perseus's hand. The people cried out in awe, their voices rising like a hymn of gratitude carried across the shore. Perseus descended gently. The pouch closed again, the weight of power hidden once more from mortal gaze. He approached Andromeda, breaking her chains with the blade, offering freedom not only from iron, but from fate. Her eyes met his, filled with gratitude, but also the spark of destiny. Two lives now entwined. The people gathered around, calling Perseus savior, calling him hero, blessing his name with endless praise. But Perseus knew the journey was not yet done, for every gift from the gods carried deeper trials. Still, in that moment, he felt the truth of heroism, not in triumph, but in the lives he saved. And so he stood beside Andromeda, a new chapter written, the sea calm, the stars watching in silence. The journey of Perseus did not end with the rescue of Andromeda, for new trials rose with each passing day. The air was filled with celebration, but beneath joy, whispers of envy and fear spread like shadows through the crowd. King Cepheus and Queen Cassiopeia welcomed Perseus, yet their eyes carried unease at the power he now held. The people praised him as savior, but rulers saw danger in a hero who carried the will of the gods. Perseus remained humble, speaking little, remembering Athena's wisdom that true strength lay not in pride, but in restraint. Andromeda walked beside him, her steps light, yet her spirit heavy, for she knew her parents' fears too well. The bond between them deepened, not from chance, but from the courage that bound two souls against the storm. Still, fate stirred again, for Perseus carried Medusa's head, a relic of terror that drew both awe and dread. He knew it could not remain in mortal hands, for power without guidance corrupts even the purest of hearts. Athena's voice echoed in memory, urging him onward, reminding him that gifts of the gods are never truly kept. So Perseus set out once more, leaving Ethiopia with Andromeda at his side toward lands where destiny waited. Their path was long, through valleys and mountains, through villages that spoke of heroes and whispered of the Gorgon's curse. Everywhere they went, people marveled at his tale. Yet Perseus felt the weight of legend pressing heavier each step. In quiet nights, he looked at the stars, wondering if he was master of fate or only its servant. The sandals carried him swifter than mortal men, yet even wings cannot escape the burden of destiny's design. Soon they returned to Seriphos, the island of his childhood, where his mother Danae still lived under Polydectes' rule. News reached Perseus that the king had grown crueler, pressing Danae to wed, ignoring her pleas and her dignity. Rage burned within Perseus, yet he tempered it with wisdom, for Athena had taught him patience before action. Polydectes mocked Perseus, claiming his quest a lie, demanding proof of Medusa's head, certain no man could achieve it. The hall filled with nobles, laughter echoing at the hero's return, mocking the journey, mocking the promise of gods. Perseus spoke not a word, but drew forth the pouch, his hand steady as silence fell over the crowd. The head revealed its face, its eyes lifeless yet powerful, and all who met the gaze turned to stone. Polydectes froze where he stood, his pride shattered in silence. His cruelty ended in a single moment of truth. The hall became a tomb, filled with statues of men who mocked courage, their voices silenced by divine justice. Perseus turned away, closing the pouch again, his face solemn, for victory came heavy, not light. Danae embraced him, her tears of relief falling, not for triumph, but for the safety of her son. Andromeda stood near, watching the man she now loved, knowing his journey was not conquest, but sacrifice. In that moment, Perseus understood what it meant to be chosen, not to rule, but to serve justice and life. And so he prepared to give the head of Medusa to Athena, returning power to wisdom where it belonged. For heroes are not crowned by glory alone, but by the choices they make when no one else can stand. Perseus stood at the shore, the waves rising and falling, carrying whispers of the gods across the endless sea. In his hands rested the pouch with Medusa's head, a gift too great, too dangerous, to remain with mortal men. Athena had guided him from the beginning, and now the time had come to return what belonged to divine hands. Andromeda walked beside him, her gaze steady, knowing that his journey was not yet finished. Though victories had been won, they sailed across waters calm and stormy, the stars above guiding their path as if the heavens themselves watched. At dawn, the ship reached the coast of Athens, where temples rose in shining stone, glowing in the golden light. Perseus climbed the marble steps of Athena's temple, his heart heavy, for he carried both burden and blessing in one. Inside, the air was still, the walls painted with stories of heroes, warriors, and the wisdom of the goddess herself. He knelt before the altar, placing the pouch upon the stone, lifting his voice to the goddess who had guided him. Athena, daughter of Zeus, wise protector, I return this gift, for power such as this is yours alone to bear." The air trembled as the goddess appeared, her presence radiant, her eyes filled with the calm fire of divine wisdom. "Well done, Perseus," she said, her voice like bronze and wind. "You have proven courage tempered with restraint and humility." She lifted the pouch, raising the head of Medusa, and placed it upon her shield, the mighty Aegis, forever bound. "Now her power serves justice, not chaos," Athena declared. And the temple glowed with light as the shield shone bright. Perseus bowed, yet his heart felt no pride, only the weight of what had been lost and what had been learned. Athena looked upon him with kindness, saying, "You are more than a warrior, Perseus. You are a keeper of balance." Andromeda stepped forward, standing with him, and Athena smiled, seeing the bond forged not by chance, but by shared fate. The goddess then blessed them both, granting peace to their union, a harmony that no curse or shadow could undo. As they left the temple, the people of Athens looked upon Perseus with awe, whispering of his deeds and destiny. But Perseus turned away from glory, his hand holding Andromeda's, for he knew that honor lived in quiet hearts. Together, they journeyed back to Seriphos, where Dictys welcomed them, his arms open, his home filled with warmth and peace. Perseus gave the throne to Dictys, the just man who had raised him, ensuring the island would know kindness, not tyranny. For Perseus had no thirst for crowns, only for justice, for his heart was guided by Athena's wisdom above all. Danae found comfort at last. Her years of sorrow ended, her son now a man whose strength protected, not destroyed. Andromeda stood with her, two women bound by trials, now sharing hope as the household filled with laughter and light. Yet Perseus knew that stories of heroes never truly end, for legends grow with time, carried by voices and stars. At night, he looked to the sky, where constellations shone, and he wondered if one day his place would be there. For though the journey slowed, fate still whispered, reminding him that a hero's legacy is not his alone to shape. Perseus lived in Seriphos for a time, his days filled with peace, but destiny rarely lets heroes rest for long. Stories of his deeds spread across Greece, reaching distant kings, stirring both admiration and fear in equal measure. Men spoke of the slayer of Medusa, the rescuer of Andromeda, the champion blessed by Athena's guiding wisdom. But prophecy does not fade, and the shadow of fate still lingered, woven into the thread of Perseus's life. King Acrisius of Argos, his grandfather, still feared the words once spoken, that his daughter's son would bring his fall. He had cast Danae into the sea long ago, but now Perseus lived, strong and honored, and the prophecy endured. Unaware of his grandfather's fear, Perseus traveled with Andromeda, answering calls for aid from distant lands and troubled kings. One day they came to Thessaly, where games were held in honor of the gods, contests of strength, speed, and skill. Perseus entered, not for glory, but for the joy of contest, his spirit eager to test his strength in sport. The crowd roared as he stepped into the field, the hero of legends now standing among common men as their equal. He threw the discus with power, the bronze spinning like a star, arcing across the sky with shining force. The crowd gasped, the discus veering wide, striking a man hidden among the onlookers, and silence fell like stone. The man lay still, struck by fate, and as Perseus rushed forward, the truth was revealed. It was Acrisius. The prophecy had spoken true not by malice, but by chance, for destiny finds its path in ways unseen. Perseus stood frozen, the weight of tragedy upon him. knowing he had fulfilled the oracle's words against his will. The crowd whispered, the air heavy with awe and fear, for even heroes cannot escape the woven threads of fate. Andromeda placed her hand upon his arm, her presence steady, her gaze filled with sorrow and unshaken loyalty. Athena appeared, unseen by most, her voice echoing within Perseus's heart. Do not fear what is woven, only honor it. Perseus buried Acrisius with respect, offering prayers to the gods, seeking peace for the man who had sought to defy fate. Then he chose not to take the throne of Argos, for blood had brought sorrow, and he desired no crown. Instead, he traded Argos for tyrants, building a new city, founding a home where justice and wisdom could flourish. With Andromeda beside him, he raised a kingdom not of conquest, but of harmony, guided by Athena's eternal light. Danae lived in peace, her years softened by joy, her son now king not by prophecy, but by virtue. Andromeda bore him children, each blessed by gods, for their union was watched by the stars and guarded by fate. Perseus ruled with fairness, his memory of trials shaping his hand, his voice carrying both strength and compassion. Yet he knew that all heroes pass, but their stories endure, carried from lips to hearts, from hearth to sky. And so Perseus's tale grew, not only of battles won, but of choices made and of wisdom greater than might. For he was more than the slayer of Medusa. He was the man who faced fate with courage, humility, and love. Perseus grew older, and though his strength remained, the years brought wisdom that no sword or shield could grant. He looked upon his children, each bearing promise, and saw in them the legacy of both mortal and divine blood. Andromeda stood beside him always, her grace steady, her heart unshaken, a queen whose courage matched his own. Together, they ruled tyrants, guiding the city with justice, teaching that true strength lies not in force, but in wisdom. People spoke of Perseus not only as the slayer of Medusa, but as a king who brought peace and fairness. Still, whispers of fate continued, for heroes are never free from the weight of stories that stretch beyond their lives. Perseus often sought counsel in temples, raising prayers to Athena, thanking her for light, guidance, and the balance of fate. At night, under the stars, he would wonder if his tale was nearly written, or if the gods had more planned. One morning, messengers came from Mycenae, calling Perseus to settle disputes among rival kings, a test of his wisdom. He journeyed with Andromeda and his sons, carrying no weapon but the lessons earned from hardship and divine guidance. The kings argued, each grasping for power, their voices sharp, their hearts clouded by greed, envy, and endless pride. Perseus stood before them, his presence quiet yet firm, speaking of justice, harmony, and the dangers of ambition unchecked. His words calmed the assembly, for the hero's voice carried the weight of truth and the memory of trials overcome. The kings agreed to peace, not out of fear, but out of respect, for wisdom often conquers where swords cannot. Perseus returned to Tiryns, greeted by cheers, his people reminded that greatness rests not only in battle but in counsel. But even as peace held, Perseus sensed the circle of destiny turning, for all heroes must one day meet their end. The gods watched, silent but present, their designs woven into the very threads of his mortal and immortal existence. One evening, a vision came to him in dreams. Athena appearing radiant, her shield shining brighter than the moon. She spoke softly. Perseus, your path nears its close, but your name shall live eternal in the sky above. He awoke, calm and unafraid, for he had faced monsters, kings, and fate itself, and found strength in every trial. Years passed, And when his final day came, Perseus laid down not as a warrior, but as a father and king. Andromeda mourned, their children wept, yet the gods honored him, lifting his form into the heavens for all to see. There he became a constellation, his stars marking the sky, forever a guardian watching over sailors and dreamers alike. Andromeda, too, was placed among the stars, their love eternal, shining as a reminder of courage, loyalty, and devotion. The people gazed upward, telling their children of Perseus, not only the slayer of Medusa, but the king of wisdom. Thus his story endured, a tale of fate, love, and valor, carried through time, guiding hearts as brightly as the stars. The story of Perseus did not end with his passing, for legends live on long after mortal breath is gone. Bards carried his name through villages, singing of his courage, his wisdom, and the love he shared with Andromeda. Children listened wide-eyed, imagining the hero with his shield and sandals, yet learning too of his kindness and humility. Sailors gazed at the night sky, steering their ships by the constellation that bore his name across the heavens. Andromeda's stars shone nearby, reminding them that love can endure storms, battles, and even the silent march of time. Athena herself was honored in each retelling, for without her guidance, Perseus could not have shaped such a destiny. The people of Tiryns built temples, not to glorify war, but to celebrate balance, courage, and the wisdom of the gods. Festivals arose where stories were told, dancers moving like waves, voices rising to honor the hero turned immortal guide. Andromeda guided their children, teaching them the same truths, that power must serve justice, and pride must bend to wisdom. Their sons grew strong, their daughters wise, carrying forward the values their parents carved into the heart of the land. Travelers spoke of Perseus far beyond Greece, his name reaching distant shores where stars lit paths for unknown voyagers. The myth became a beacon, a torch passed down, not chained to one kingdom, but free across the world of men. Generations later, poets wove his deeds into verses, philosophers pondered his choices, and kings sought to emulate his rule. But what made his story endure was not the head of Medusa, nor the monster slain, nor the kingdom saved. It was his heart, steadfast and true, his willingness to face fear, and his choice to place love above glory. In every retelling, Perseus was shown as both hero and man, one who carried burdens, yet never lost compassion. Athena's blessing remained eternal, her wisdom flowing through the memory of his deeds like a river that never dries. On nights when the stars blaze clear, farmers, kings, and dreamers alike look upward and whisper the hero's name. Perseus is not only a tale of gods and monsters, but a lesson that destiny is shaped by courage and love. Andromeda, too, remains a symbol, a queen who was once a maiden in chains, yet rose to reign with dignity. Together, they remind the world that true power is shared, not taken, and that honor shines brighter when tempered by care. The gods set them in the heavens, not as distant figures, but as eternal companions, guiding those who look above. So the tale closes, yet never truly ends. For as long as voices speak, Perseus and Andromeda will live on. Their stars remain, their story endures, and their love is carved not in stone, but in the endless sky of memory. The story of Perseus did not end with his passing, for legends live on long after mortal breath is gone. Bards carried his name through villages, singing of his courage, his wisdom, and the love he shared with Andromeda. Children listened wide-eyed, imagining the hero with his shield and sandals, yet learning too of his kindness and humility. Sailors gazed at the night sky, steering their ships by the constellation that bore his name across the heavens. Andromeda's stars shone nearby, reminding them that love can endure storms, battles, and even the silent march of time. Athena herself was honored in each retelling, for without her guidance, Perseus could not have shaped such a destiny. The people of Tiryns built temples not to glorify war, but to celebrate balance, courage, and the wisdom of the gods. Festivals arose where stories were told, dancers moving like waves, voices rising to honor the hero-turned immortal guide. Andromeda guided their children, teaching them the same truths, that power must serve justice and pride must bend to wisdom. Their sons grew strong, their daughters wise, carrying forward the values their parents carved into the heart of the land. Travelers spoke of Perseus far beyond Greece, his name reaching distant shores where stars lit paths for unknown voyagers. The myth became a beacon, a torch passed down, not chained to one kingdom, but free across the world of men. Generations later, poets wove his deeds into verses, philosophers pondered his choices, and kings sought to emulate his rule. But what made his story endure was not the head of Medusa, nor the monster slain, nor the kingdom saved. It was his heart, steadfast and true, his willingness to face fear, and his choice to place love above glory. In every retelling, Perseus was shown as both hero and man, one who carried burdens yet never lost compassion. Athena's blessing remained eternal, her wisdom flowing through the memory of his deeds like a river that never dries. On nights when the stars blaze clear, farmers, kings, and dreamers alike look upward and whisper the hero's name. Perseus is not only a tale of gods and monsters, but a lesson that destiny is shaped by courage and love. Andromeda too remains a symbol, a queen who was once a maiden in chains, yet rose to reign with dignity. Together, they remind the world that true power is shared, not taken, and that honor shines brighter when tempered by care. The gods set them in the heavens, not as distant figures, but as eternal companions, guiding those who look above. So the tale closes, yet never truly ends. For as long as voices speak, Perseus and Andromeda will live on. Their stars remain, their story endures, and their love is carved not in stone, but in the endless sky of memory.